It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I am Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. Joining me today from Paris is my colleague Ross Cullen. Ross, namaste. Good to have you with us.
Hello and namaste, Tanvi. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, more on the Russia-Ukraine war. We'll have a report from Moscow. Also a shockwave election results in the Netherlands. And it's Thanksgiving in the US. We'll have the latest from Washington. But first, Tanvi with the headlines.
Israel-Hamas truce delayed until at least Friday. Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital director detained by Israeli military following evidence of the hospital serving as a Hamas command center. A Russian war correspondent working for state television and a Russian theater actress killed in Ukrainian drone strikes in Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. Far-right politician Geert Wilders wins the election in the Netherlands, emerges as the front-runner for the Prime Minister's post. And the world watches in anticipation as rescue operations at the collapsed tunnel site in India's Uttarkashi enter the final stage, communication established with the trapped workers. First news of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Israeli officials have said that there would be no release of hostages held by Hamas before Friday, despite the two sides agreeing to a temporary truce. The deal was approved by the Israeli government early on Wednesday and had been widely expected to take effect today. Hamas has been holding over 200 people as hostages after launching an attack on Israel on October the 7th. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that over 150 trucks carrying relief material are entering Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli military chief of staff met army personnel in Gaza and motivated them to continue fighting until victory is achieved.
We are not ending the war. We will continue until we are victorious, going forward and continuing in other Hamas areas.
The Israeli military confirmed today that the director of the Al-Shifa, Gaza's largest hospital, has been held for questioning over evidence that the hospital had been used as a control center by Hamas. The military said Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya had been in charge of the hospital complex when Hamas militants built a sprawling network and stored weapons inside the hospital. The IDF claims under his management there was extensive Hamas terror activity in the hospital. Meanwhile, Israeli armed forces released a video showing an entrance to Hamas's secret tunnel network near Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. In the video released today, Israel military spokesperson Daniel Hagari is seen walking through the wrecked home which connects to the underground tunnel. Israel has claimed that Hamas is holding hostages in this underground tunnel as human shields in this ongoing conflict. Now, UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron is in Israel, where he met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. Cameron welcomed the truce between the Israeli government and Hamas to a 4-day pause in fighting and called it a crucial step to get Israeli hostages out and deliver aid to the besieged enclave.
Today is also a day where we hope to see this humanitarian pause. I think that's important because it's an opportunity to get hostages out and to get aid in, and I hope and would urge everyone who's involved in that agreement to make sure that it happens. I think it is important.
Now, DD India's correspondent Stuart Smith has more on Cameron's visit to Israel from London.
The former UK Prime Minister said he wanted to come himself to see the horrific attack the town suffered in October. He relayed being told how parents were shot in front of their children and children shot in front of their parents, a message he said he would never forget. Earlier on Thursday, he said he hoped for the humanitarian pause, an important opportunity, he said, to get hostages out and aid in. But that plan has been delayed, with Israeli officials saying any swap would happen at the earliest on Friday. If it does happen, it's expected around 50 Israeli women and children would be released while fighting pauses to ensure safety for aid convoys entering Gaza. Ahead of arriving in Israel, David Cameron spoke with Arab and Islamic leaders in the UK. Stuart Smith in London, reporting for DD India.
On to the Russia-Ukraine war now. A Russian journalist has been killed by a Ukrainian drone strike. Further, a Russian theatre actress has also been killed while performing in another Ukrainian strike. She was performing in front of the military troops. My colleague Ross Cullen is in Paris. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ross, over 600 days into the war and there is no signs of stoppage.
Tanvi, Russian war correspondent has been killed in a drone strike by Ukrainian armed forces in a Russian-controlled part of southeastern Ukraine. Now, the Russian state channel correspondent Boris Maksudov suffered grave shrapnel wounds and doctors were unable to save him. Russian investigators claim that Ukraine's armed forces struck a group of Russian journalists with shells and drones. Now, in another incident, a Russian actress was also killed in a Ukrainian attack in the Donbass region. Polina Menshik was performing at a volunteer concert for Russian soldiers at the time of the attack. Authorities have also reported other civilian deaths. DD India's Dasha Chernyshova sent us this report from Moscow.
The death of journalist Boris Maksudov, who worked for Russian state television Russia 24. On Wednesday, a group of Russian journalists came under the Ukrainian fire in the Zaporizhia region. A 38-year-old Maksudov was wounded and taken to hospital. Initially, the Ministry of Defense said he was in a stable condition. However, he later died of shrapnel wounds. The ministry said Maksudov was in the group of journalists who were filming for the reports about the shelling of the Zaporizhia region. The Kremlin has extended its condolences to the family and colleagues of Boris Maksudov. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the death of journalists underlines once again how dangerous is the work of journalists in the area of the special military operation in Ukraine, adding that journalists have become a direct target. Peskov also noted that he was not surprised by the lack of reaction on the part of Western politicians. Russian Foreign Ministry's spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the Russian journalists for many years have been a target for the Ukrainian authorities. Russian investigative committee said it was going to look into the matter. It is not the first time that Russian journalists come under the Ukrainian fire. Last month, Moscow said 3 correspondents from the Izvestia news outlet were injured after being shelled in the Donetsk region. Dasha Chernyshova reported in Moscow for DD India.
Ukraine's national seed bank has been successfully moved from the eastern city of Kharkiv to an undisclosed location that is safer. Last spring, a research facility near the seed bank was damaged. That raised concerns about the preservation of the collection. The National Seed Bank in Ukraine is the 10th largest seed collection in the world. The gene bank includes many endemic seed species, some of which are important for food security. The European Union has approved $1 billion in advance payments to Hungary in a bid to stop Budapest from blocking Brussels' aid to Ukraine. Earlier, the bloc froze Hungary out of its post-pandemic economic stimulus package. In turn, Hungary blocked the EU's decisions to grant Ukraine €50 billion in economic aid. Now, Budapest also stalled a plan to extend €20 billion in EU military aid to Kiev. Populist leader Geert Wilders' Freedom Party has won the Netherlands elections in a victory that's set to send shockwaves across Europe. With almost all the votes counted, the Freedom Party has won 37 seats, much ahead of its nearest rival, a left-wing alliance. However, in order to become the Prime Minister of the Netherlands and form a government, Geert Wilders will have to convince other parties to form a coalition, as he needs 76 seats for a majority in the 150-member parliament.
For 25 years now, and this is the happiest day of my life so far in politics. We became the #1 party by far. I mean, it's what a lot of people, if you would have asked them a year ago, would call you mad, and it happened today. So I'm very proud, I'm very happy, and it brings along a lot of feeling of responsibility.
DD India's Trent Murray sent us the latest from Berlin.
Pollsters and analysts will be dusting themselves off this morning after this political earthquake, which has really shaken Dutch politics and its political establishment to the core. For 25 years, Geert Wilders has really been on the fringe of Dutch politics. He made a name for himself with his hardline approach to the issue of immigration, particularly people coming to the Netherlands of the Islamic faith. He has promised in the past to close down mosques, to ban the opening of Islamic schools, even to ban the teaching of the Quran. It's worth noting he has toned down that rhetoric somewhat during this campaign, but nobody saw this coming. We knew that he was polling at an okay level, somewhere in the middle of the pack, but for him to come out as the #1 party really has shocked a lot of people, not just in the Netherlands, but within Europe. I mean, he is sometimes described in many ways as the Dutch Donald Trump, and not just because of his peroxide blonde hair. He's very much an outsider, somebody that goes against the grain, and is a politician that for decades other parties have simply refused to work with. Well, it will be very difficult, I think, for those mainstream political parties now to ignore him and his presence within the parliament.
New Zealand's incoming Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said he hopes the swearing-in ceremony of the new government will take place on Monday after his National Party reached a deal with ACT New Zealand and New Zealand First. A formal signing agreement between the parties was expected on Friday, and ministerial positions could also be announced. The centre-right National Party won the largest share of the votes in New Zealand's recent general election.
Pleased to announce that we're in a position where we've concluded our negotiations with the respective parties. Those agreements are now before the parties for ratification, which we hope to have this evening, at which point I'll talk again to the Governor-General and formally confirm that we're able to form a government.
The US is celebrating its annual Thanksgiving holiday, with millions of people travelling across the country to visit family and friends. But with record numbers moving around the United States and extreme storms predicted in parts of the country, it could be a stressful day for many. DD India's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The annual US holiday is a time to give thanks, to tot up all the things you're grateful for. But for many Americans, it's also a time of intense frustration as they sit in their cars or airport lounges waiting to get where they're hoping to go. A record number of people are travelling this Thanksgiving. No pandemic travel restrictions and cheaper gas prices are motivating many to get on the roads and into the air. Up to 5 million people are flying, almost 50 million driving. Even last year's problems of snowstorms and flight cancellations hasn't deterred people from travelling. But storms with rain, snow and strong winds are bringing travel chaos to millions. Thousands of flights have been delayed, dozens have been cancelled. And for those who make it around the Thanksgiving table, many are reportedly concerned about what they're going to talk about with their friends and family. A survey shows 60% of people plan to avoid politics as a topic of conversation in the hope of avoiding arguments. Shopping is another big activity over Thanksgiving, both online and in person. More than 180 million Americans, that's more than half of the population, are planning purchases during Thanksgiving, Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales events. That'll be a record-breaking number and an increase on last year, as inflationary pressures and prices have dropped slightly during the last 12 months. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
United States troops stationed in South Korea celebrated the Thanksgiving holiday with the traditional festive meal. Now, higher-rank Army officers served the Thanksgiving meal to soldiers stationed thousands of miles away from home. And that's it from me here in Paris. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. Ross Cullen there joining us from Paris. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Indian IT Minister chairs a key meet on artificial intelligence technology, says a new set of regulations will be introduced soon to tackle deep fakes. And Britain's King Charles honours K-pop band Blackpink with Member of the Order of the British Empire at the Buckingham Palace.
Recent conflicts, wars and calamities have displaced millions of people worldwide. Will this migrant situation lead to a global socio-economic crisis? Watch Connecting the Dots at these times only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Next news from India. After more than a week's endeavour to reach the 41 workers trapped in a collapsed tunnel in India's northern city of Uttarkashi, the rescue and relief operation has now entered its last stage. After rescuers managed to place broad pipes up to a depth of 45 meters through the debris via horizontal drilling, further drilling is underway. Police has prepared a green corridor for this effective rescue mission. 41 ambulances are also on standby to take the workers to a makeshift hospital. 44 pipes have been inserted after horizontal drilling so far. And during a press conference, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain said that 5-directional approach is being taken up, and the good news is that the workers are safe and they are in a 2-kilometer long stretch inside the tunnel now.
अच्छी खबरें तो ये हैं कि वर्कर जो अंदर हैं राजी खुशी हैं, परसेप्शन भी बदला है देश के अंदर कि उनके पास ये कोई कोठरी में नहीं घुसे हैं, कोई माइन के अंदर नहीं घुसे हैं, वो वहां पर एक 2 किलोमीटर का टनल का इलाका है जिसके अंदर वो हैं। ऑक्सीजन की कोई कमी नहीं है, लाइट की कमी नहीं है, खाना पीना क्योंकि 6 इंच की पाइपलाइन वहां बन चुकी थी परसों, तो खाना पीना काफी तादाद में अंदर चला गया है, यहां तक कि कपड़े भी चले गए हैं, दवाएं काफी तादाद के अंदर वहां अंदर पहुंच गई हैं, पानी की कोई कमी नहीं है। आइसोलेशन, एक चीज आइसोलेशन होती है जिससे मानसिक असर होता है, साइकोलॉजिकल इफेक्ट, उसको भी दूर करने के लिए साइको सोशल काउंसलर्स वहां लाए गए हैं। और अब क्योंकि कम्युनिकेशन बन गया है प्रॉपर, पहले तो एक क्रूड कम्युनिकेशन मेगाफोन के जरिए पाइप के जरिए था, अब तो लाइन के जरिए वो कम्युनिकेशन बन गया है और डायरेक्ट बात हो रही है वहां से, तो उसकी वजह से साइको सोशल काउंसलर्स जो हैं उन्होंने उनसे बात भी की है वर्कर्स के साथ।
More from New Delhi. Seychelles Foreign Minister Silvestre Radegonde, who is in India for a 3-day official visit, met India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar in New Delhi. On the second day of the visit, the two leaders had wide-ranging conversations on bilateral relations and also exchanged views on regional concerns. After the meeting, Indian Foreign Minister announced an exchange of MOUs on Indian grant assistance for implementation of small development projects and cooperation in the fields of youth and sports affairs. India's Minister for Communications, Electronics and Information Technology, Ashwini Vaishnav, on Thursday chaired a meeting with social media platforms and other stakeholders on the issue of deep fake. He stated that new regulations will be brought with a focus on 4 aspects: detection, prevention, reporting mechanism and awareness.
We agreed that we will start drafting the regulation today. Government will bring regulation for detection, prevention, strengthening the reporting mechanism and creating awareness and using technologies for deep fakes and AI-generated content which can be harmful for the society. When we do the regulation, when we draft the regulation, we'll also be looking at the penalty, both on the person who has uploaded or created as well as the platform.
Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, during an interaction in New Delhi today, stated that the security of consumer data is a government's top priority.
The government's policy or the government's approach in creating public platforms which are going to be used by the customer or the citizen or the individual who wants banking facility is top on the priority list. His data is completely protected. It cannot be misused. But at the same time, it shall not be so restrictive that the person will have to run between one pillar to the other post to seek facility. The moment you approve that you're willing to give it, yes, to that limited purpose, it will be shared without much hindrance. So on data protection, I can assure the Indian citizens that your data remains completely safe.
And further north in Asia now, the World Health Organization is asking China for more information on reports of clusters of pneumonia in children and a general rise in respiratory diseases there. The Chinese authorities recently said such illnesses were at their highest level in 3 years. DD India's Andrew Wood reports from Hong Kong.
Well, the health authorities in China noted about 10 days ago that there was an increase. There were much higher level of respiratory diseases and illnesses in China than a year ago, the highest for 3 years. In a way, that's not unexpected because, remember, a year ago, China was in the middle of some very, very strict measures to try to stop the spread of COVID. And if you stop the spread of COVID, you also stop the spread of other diseases like flu and so on. Nevertheless, there have been other reports from an organisation known as ProMed of what they consider could be undiagnosed pneumonia, especially amongst children. Now, it's unclear that the WHO's request, whether this is about the general rise in respiratory illnesses or whether it's more specifically about this apparent spike or cluster amongst children. We still don't know. This is one of the reasons, after all, why the WHO is asking for information. Now, the authorities in Beijing have said that this is just a routine request of information from the WHO. But do remember, think back to 3 years ago when we were having the, just before COVID-19 emerged, was that cluster of cases emerged in China. And there were a lot of complaints and criticisms of the WHO and China as well for not being very transparent in the way that information was collected and disseminated, or for that matter was not disseminated. And so there's been a lot of scrutiny of both China and the WHO since then. And remember, this is quite controversial. Remember, a couple of years ago, Australia called for an independent investigation into the origins of COVID, an independent international investigation. And China didn't like that at all, and it put sanctions and tariffs on many Australian products as a result. In Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Wood, reporting for DD India.
And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. International Atomic Energy Agency has said that the current situation at the Zaporizhzhia power plant in southern Ukraine remains challenging. The nuclear watchdog discussed in a board meeting that 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety and security at Zaporizhzhia were partially damaged and continue to pose a huge risk to the overall nuclear safety of the plant. The World Food Programme is providing emergency food assistance to thousands of Afghans from Pakistan who moved back to their ethnic state amid Pakistan's announcement to expel undocumented Afghans. The world body also said that the vulnerable people have very little resources during the harsh winter season. The government of Iceland granted media access to the town of Grindavik, which has experienced frequent earthquakes since late October. It now faces a possible volcanic eruption. About 4,000 residents from the area have been evacuated as the roads cracked The infrastructure, water and electricity systems were disrupted and buildings suffered structural damages. Britain's King Charles presented K-pop band Blackpink with an honorary member of the Order of the British Empire in recognition of the band's role as COP26 advocates for the COP26 summit in Glasgow in 2021. The four-member girl group attended the UK-South Korea state banquet in the presence of President Yoon Suk-yeol then. And Greece's Olympic rowing champion Stefanos will be the first torchbearer of the Paris 2024 Olympics relay after the next year's lighting ceremony in ancient Olympia. The Olympic flame will be lit in Olympia on April 16th in a traditional ceremony with an actress playing a high priestess lighting the torch using a parabolic mirror and the sun. After an 11-day relay, the flame will be handed over to the Paris Games organizers in Athens on April the 26th, with a water polo Olympic silver medalist as the final torchbearer. Remember, the Paris Olympics will be held from July 26th to August 11th next year. So that's all for this edition of DD India Global. Join us tomorrow at 5 and 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.